Welcome into the newest episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Glad to have you all here with us, joining us for episode 69 of the podcast, where we're going to be talking mostly all things Bad Batch, as we are now officially less than a week away from the premiere of the third and final season of the show that we've grown to love over the past few years in the Bad Batch. Super excited for that. I'm going to be breaking all that down today. Before we get into any of that, want to give you a reminder that if you're not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel, definitely check us out over there for the video version of every podcast, as well as our reactions to new Star Wars shows, especially The Bad Batch, which we will be releasing separate videos over on the YouTube channel for in the coming 12 weeks or so. We're super pumped to get back to some reactions as well. Additionally, you can contact us via email at hothhangout@gmail.com. If you have any Star Wars related thoughts or questions, we'd love to showcase them here on the podcast and discuss them as well. Additionally, the Hoth Hangout podcast is findable wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple. And if you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, leave a 5-star review on the podcast. We would appreciate it. And it does also allow others to more easily discover the podcast. So we appreciate you for doing that. Additionally, the Hoth Hangout podcast is findable on all the socials, whether it be Instagram, TikTok, or X at Hoth Hangout on each of those. A little bit of a teaser of this week's viewer question is: will Clone Force 99 survive season 3 when it's
Ooh,
all said and done? Will they be intact? That's the question. Joey, that's a question I'm going to pose to you probably today as well. But before we get into some of the details, what's going on, man? How are you? Happy
pretty
Valentine's
good.
Day, by the way.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day for those that are, or Happy Singles Awareness Day, depending on
Yeah.
which side you fall on the spectrum. But yeah, it's we're recording on Valentine's Day today, and yeah, it's been a good one. And I mean, you and I are rocking the black shirts today. I didn't realize we were matching.
Yeah.
I appropriately am wearing my Bad Batch shirt, but want to give a little shout out to your cool little shirt as well.
Get Fisto Bump.
Kid Fisto bumps. I love it.
And I did look up, I think the other Jedi on here, on this side is his Padawan, who I believe's named is Nadar Veb, if
Oh, I
I'm not
remember. Yes, yes,
mistaken.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had a tragic ending. Hopefully that's not
That's
a
right.
spoiler to anyone. But
Yes.
yep, rocking the Star Wars merch. By the way, check out this gift I
Oh,
got recently.
oh, we got the Valentine's Pepto Bismol Ahsoka. I like it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the Valentine's Day themed Ahsoka. Kind of fun.
I love it.
Thought I'd share that as well. So, yeah, we're pretty excited about the premiere of season 3, which is again officially less than a week away. I'm really excited, by the way, as a side note, to get back into watching these episodes with you. I feel like it's been, I guess, Ahsoka was the most recent show that we've been able to
Mm-hmm.
watch together. Excited to get back
It's gonna be
to
this one's gonna be a
watching some
grind though.
new
It's
stuff.
what's 14 weeks or whatever
Yeah,
of content week after week. So it's gonna be fun.
yeah,
They're shorter episodes as in comparison to Ahsoka, but still
right.
it's gonna be Star Wars. We're gonna love it.
Yeah. Well, especially next week's gonna be a grind because the first 3 episodes all come out on that same, so we're gonna be watching, like, over an hour of Bad Batch, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm not complaining, don't
Not
get me
complaining.
wrong, it's gonna be fun. Which also, before we get into our news segment today, I should give a reminder to everyone. We're not 100% sure what the exact release schedule will be in future weeks in the next like 2 or 3 months about the podcast, but we do know next week the podcast will come out Friday morning rather than Thursday morning. And then the reaction to episodes 1, 2, and 3 of season 3 of The Bad Batch will probably be available no later than early Thursday morning, potentially as early as late Wednesday night, but probably early Thursday morning. So be on the lookout Thursday morning for not episode 70 of the podcast, but our reaction to the first 3 episodes of Bad Batch. And then episode 70 of the podcast, mostly talking about the Bad Batch, will become available Friday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thought worth mentioning that off the bat, too. But before we start talking about a lot of the Bad Batch info we've got for you all in store today, a couple of pieces of news that we got over the more recent days. was that Ubisoft, the creators of the upcoming game Star Wars Outlaws, revealed in a recent announcement that they are going to reveal more about this game in a future announcement. So, like, kind of announcing that we're going to announce something, which I guess is exciting in the sense that this game is one that I know a lot of people are excited about, sort of an open world, bounty hunter centered Star Wars game. And again, this game I don't think is coming out this year, as best as I understand it. But this game, along with Assassin's Creed Red, which is also a Ubisoft uh, owned property, will be there will be more information available in May, about 3 months from now. So, um, not a ton of
Right.
news to this, other
This
than the fact that it is coming.
this reminds me of how Apple does their announcements, where
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
they're going to have an announce. They announce when they're going to announce the next thing that they're going to announce. So,
yes,
not a ton of news here. I would be shocked if this game came out by the end of this year, but I mean the way they dropped this game at all, as far as how they dropped the trailer and shortly thereafter gave, like, I forget if it was 8 or 11 minutes of gameplay shortly after last year. Um, it would be a pleasant surprise if they did somehow pull off like a holiday type of release here. Because here's the thing, why would you announce something in May if it wasn't going to, have like this announcement for the
right.
announcement in May if you weren't going to do anything that year? So that's kind of my hopes. That's the maybe the underdog bets coming off of your. Oh, by the way, congratulations on your Kansas City Chiefs win. We
Oh
seem
yes,
to
yes.
glazed
Shout
over
out
that.
to all the other Chiefs fans out there, Super Bowl
Right.
champs.
Yeah, so maybe they, and I believe the Chiefs were the underdog of that
They were.
particular game. So
Yep.
maybe the Star Wars Outlaws being released this year will be the Kansas City Chiefs of 2024 gaming. So yeah, I would maybe put a small bet that maybe they'll have something by the end of the year, maybe a holiday release, but nothing too crazy.
That'd be fun. I hope so. This game, along with Star Wars Eclipse, which I feel
Hmm.
like we know far less about than Star Wars Outlaws, because I don't think Eclipse is even supposed to come out for like years now or
Was
something
that the
like
one
that.
that was the indefinite? No, that was the Knights of the Old Republic, right? It wasn't the remake of
Ye-
that. That's kind of like indefinitely
Right.
on
That's the
pause
one
or
that
something.
was on pause. Eclipse was the one that trailer randomly dropped like almost a year ago. There was that guy banging that drum.
Yes, yes,
Uh
yes.
And I think it's made by the same studio. I don't know if you've ever played Detroit Become Human,
I've seen
but
it, but never played it. Yeah.
it's like a super choice-based driven game. So, like, the choices you make impacts the story. There's different outcomes in the story. So, it'd be kinda cool if this new
Hmm.
Eclipse game, which is probably years and years away at this point, is that same style. But
Yeah.
anyways, Star Wars Outlaws, we will have more information on in May, and hopefully will potentially be coming out this year as well, but we'll find out in 3
I'm
months, I
I'm hoping
guess.
for like a huge May the 4th just
Just drop all the
bombardment
stuff.
of everything.
Yeah, that'd be pretty nice. Maybe some Tales of the Jedi in there
Yeah,
too,
that
who
would be the best
knows?
part of it. Yep.
The other main piece of news that we wanted to cover this week is, of course, for all you prequels fans out there, it is the 25th anniversary, if you can believe that, of the Phantom Menace's release back in 1999 when we first set our eyes on young Obi-Wan, Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon, and of course, Darth Maul as the villain who we thought would be taking over the franchise, only to be shortly thereafter sliced in half by good old Ben Kenobi. So,
Yeah. Really got cut short
uh,
there. Yeah.
yeah, he's got dad jokes
There it
all
is.
episode. But yeah, episode one, The Phantom Menace, will be re-releasing in theaters during, I think, starting on May 3rd, actually, but on May the 4th weekend. That to mention another thing coming out this weekend, if you're interested, you've ever had family members who have never seen episode 1 of Star Wars, make a trip out of it. Go to the theaters that day, dress up in your, Darth Maul and Padme Amidala cosplays, and go check out Star Wars at your local theater, on May 3rd or May 4th. It's gonna be a fun weekend, and it's hard to believe it's been 25 years since this came out too, but excited for that weekend. A lot to look forward to. You gonna check this out in theaters? Or
I
you?
think so, yeah. I don't think my wife is particularly interested in going to this one. We did go, what was that, last year to the Return of the Jedi,
Mm.
when it was back in the theaters for, I forget if it was for the weekend or for a couple
40th
weekends.
anniversary
For the
last year.
Yes, that's correct, yeah. But I forget if we went. I forget how long it was out, but yeah, we definitely went there and it was a lot of fun. She does like the original trilogy a little bit better than the prequels, so I don't envision her coming meet with me on this one. So maybe me and a couple buddies will make a trip out of it, have some fun, and bring our lightsabers and everything.
It's funny. Star Wars now has just like a built-in system for re-releasing movies. Like every 5 years that a movie has an anniversary, it can be like, oh, it's the 15th anniversary of
Right,
Revenge of the Sith. Oh, it's the 35th anniversary of Return of the Jedi.
right.
It's like you could just continually re-release these movies every 5 years for each of their anniversaries.
And we will still continue to go every time. And I'd
Yeah,
like to
yeah,
mention the poster art for this.
super cool.
Very cool, very updated. I mean, you've got Anakin like way small there in the middle, and then as you get bigger and bigger with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, Padme. I love how they put Padme where they put her, because I feel her role is very important. But then of course you got Darth Maul like kind of overshadowing everyone. Gives me the vibes of the was it Rise of Skywalker with the Emperor in the background?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
so it kind
yeah.
of gives me that same types of vibes with that. But he was a little bit more obscure in the background, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Where
this
Darth
is
Maul is pretty, yeah, he's
very
red and
clear.
black and yellow
Yeah.
eyes. You're gonna see him.
Hard to
But
hide his visage.
yeah, and with the just kind of like the overall color of the poster is beautiful. So
Yeah.
might need to pick up this poster somehow.
Yeah, maybe they'll be giving them away at the theatrical release. Who knows? I would like to think that
Hmm.
might be an option. The Tatooine Horizon really I
Hmm.
like with the buildings looks really awesome, especially too. So Phantom Menace coming to theaters near you in about three less than 3 months time on May 3rd. It will re-release for its 25th anniversary. Be on the lookout for that. Coming off of last week's episode where we talked a little bit about Asajj Ventress after we both read the Dark Disciple book and had some discussions on our thoughts regarding the character of Asajj Ventress. We did have a comment from Aunt Vasuvi we wanted to share as part of this podcast. Aunt Vasuvi says, "What can I say? I read a lot. Many thanks to Ben and Joey. Your discussion was comprehensive and enjoyable. No notes. Plus, both me and my man have injured backs. He slipped on the grass while carrying a new washing machine. Uh oh.
Oh no.
Best wishes to both of your backs. That sounds very painful, actually. Sorry that happened, but I was sitting in a weird position to trim my toenails when I unfurled.
Oh
Was
no.
suddenly in agony. Getting old, it's an adventure. Oh dear.
Rest up,
Well,
Aunt Vesuvi.
rest up. Yes, we hope.
Advil and heat compresses are
Yeah.
your friends.
I, ice now, heat later.
That's right.
We wish the best for both you and your man's backs. Hopefully, you're getting back to 100% soon. But yeah, last week was a fun one. We got a chance to discuss a lot concerning the character of Asajj Ventress. I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit today at some point in our discussion of what we're looking forward to in the Bad Batch next season, which is also what we asked over on the YouTube community tab as well as on X for our polls last week. The question being, how will how will they bring back Asajj Ventress in Star Wars Bad Batch? The options being back from the dead using Night Sister magic, or in a flashback scene. Uh, the overwhelming majority, in fact, 100% of people on Twitter said it was going to be by magic, and 71% of people on YouTube said that it was going to be by magic. The other 29% saying it was going to be a flashback scene. Is there a third alternative in that she's actually just alive in this timeline and she was
Yeah,
never dead?
I guess that
Could
is,
be.
yeah, that's the none of the above option that we
Yeah.
we we did not put in the options. Yeah, I mean, whatever, bring her back. However they're gonna do it, I have no problem. I wouldn't even mind if somebody said somehow Ventress has returned. Something. If they did that, that would even be better.
Poe Dameron makes like a 20-second cameo, and Oscar Isaac is like, "I'm here, guys. I got my
I got
line."
you. Yeah, he was signed off for a contract to have one more line in Star Wars, and that was it.
Yeah, yeah. Be on the lookout over on the YouTube community tab as well as over on X for this week's polls as well regarding our question leading into next week's premiere of The Bad Batch. So, the majority of our discussion today is going to focus on more so the characters of The Bad Batch than the actual retelling of the story, because we didn't want to just simply do kind of like this is what happened in seasons 1 and 2. So, I know there's probably people listening to this right now that might be interested in something like that. So, what we figured we would do as a compromise, I'm going to give my 2-minute synopsis, 1 minute for each season of The Bad Batch. I'm gonna see if I can do this in
This
2
is
minutes, Joey.
this will be a world record. Any type of discussion that Ben has had a recap has never ever gone under 8 minutes.
I tend to go long on my explanations and ramblings. So if I can get this done in 2 minutes, it's going to
All
be
right,
probably the most impressive part of today's podcast, perhaps. So, are you ready, Joey?
I am ready. I'm
I'm not.
looking at the time here. I'm gonna see
I've
where
got
you're
my
at.
notes in front of me. I'm not going to veer. I'm not going to add any ad lib or side comments. I'm
Okay.
just going to run right through it.
All right,
All
let's do
right.
it.
The recap in 2 minutes or less of Bad Batch starts with season 1, where the Bad Batch is reinforces Deepa Balaba and Kanan Jarrus. Order 66 happens. Hunter and Crosshair begin to have conflict. They meet Omega on Camino, where Tarkin arrives and orders the Bad Batch to kill Saw Gerrera and the rebels. Bad Batch then leave Camino without Crosshair, as Crosshair leads soldiers to complete Tarkin's mission to the Bad Batch. Omega is almost captured by Fennec Shan, but meanwhile, the Bad Batch rescue a Rancor named Muchi after receiving the mission from Sid. The Bad Batch race the Martez sisters for the tactical droid head for intelligence, which the Martez sisters eventually get as a result of Hunter giving it to them. Rex is the client the Martez sisters were working for. Rex then helps get the inhibitor chips out of the Bad Batch's heads. Meanwhile, Wrecker goes crazy in the process, but they all get their chips out in the end. Crosshair is then ordered to kill the Bad Batch, but gets burned and is unsuccessful. Cad Bane then kidnaps Omega. Fennec Shan and Cad Bane face off. It's later revealed that Cad Bane is working for Lama Su and Fennec Shan is working for Nala Se. Omega helps pay off the Bad Batch debt by getting good at Dar Jarek. Hope I said that right. Bad Batch helps the Twi'leks on Ryloth, including young Hera. Hunter allows himself to be captured to let the others escape. The Empire then cancels contracts for cloning. Then Nala Su is taken into captivity to begin cloning research for the Empire. Crosshair then betrays his squad troopers, but still doesn't return to the Bad Batch. Admiral Rampart then bombards Topoka City, where season 1 ends and season 2 begins. The Bad Batch are sent to steal Dooku's war chest. Tech, Echo, Omega meet Romar, a local hiding from the Empire. The Bad Batch escape, but the Empire becomes aware that they survived the Topoka City bombardment. Commander Cody and Crosshair are sent to free former Imperial governor. Crosshair kills the current governor. Commander Cody and Crosshair are then. Oh, wait, I already read that. Sorry. A race on Tatooine, which is basically just the Phantom Menace. Bad Batch joins with Fee, finds a crystal called the Heart of the Mountain, nearly a massive explosion before being able to return the crystal and prevent it. The Bad Batch help a Wookiee named Gunji return to his tribe. Admiral Rampart then asks the Senate to retire the clone army. Senator Chuchi tries to help clones. The Bad Batch rescues Chuchi as a result of her almost being assassinated. Palpatine turns it around on Rampart and has him arrested. Echo stays with Rex and Chuchi to help with assisting the clones. There's a couple of side mission episodes. Then Lama Su discloses Omega's existence in exchange for his freedom. Crosshair and Mayday are out in a blizzard. Mayday is injured and trying to recover cargo. Lieutenant Nolan tells Crosshair to leave Mayday. Crosshair then kills Lieutenant Nolan in an act of defiance. Bad Batch help evacuate Fee's planet of Pabu. Echo returns to the Bad Batch. Crosshair then escapes custody and warns the rest of the Bad Batch the Empire's after Omega. Saw's group sets off explosives that leave the Bad Batch stranded in a rail car. Tech then sacrifices himself to save the rest of the crew. Sid ultimately betrays the Bad Batch. Dr. Hemlock then uses the Bad Batch as bait to capture Omega and brings Omega to Mount Tantus, where it is revealed Dr. Carr is a clone who is Omega's sister. How did
Whoa,
I do?
3 minutes.
I went over.
and about 10 seconds or so.
Man, hey, but you gotta admit, that's like the most
That's
concise I've ever been on this
I
entire
know.
podcast.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode of the Hot Hangout podcast. That's funny. Good
Um,
job.
so
That was impressive.
if anyone says we didn't recap season 1 and 2, just listen to that on 0.5 speed. You'll be fine. Yeah. So there's a lot that happened basically in seasons 1 and 2. There's a lot of kind of episodes that you and I colloquially referred to as these side mission episodes.
Right.
I'm actually doing a rewatch of the Bad Batch right now, and
Nice.
I'm almost done with season 1. And actually, my girlfriend kind of is into it right now too.
Nice.
We've been watching it together, and she said she hates Crosshair, by the way.
Yep.
And I was like,
That checks
you,
out.
I was like, and she said Wrecker is her favorite, and I was
Yeah.
like,
Also checks
you
out.
and Joey have the same favorite character, and you hate my favorite character, so
Hate's a strong word,
uh,
but hate.
yeah, not you. She hates Crosshair.
Nice.
Yeah. But she also said for me to say that she's enjoying the show. So,
Good.
where would you like to start in terms of characters that we'd like to talk about as we kind of approach season 3 of the Bad Batch? You
I
know, who
mean,
are you the most excited to learn about, or do you want to just kind of go down the list?
yeah, let's go down the list here. I mean, we could definitely start with the leader,
Good old Hunter.
Hanta.
We have to say each of these in an Australian accent, by the way. What is your favorite part about Hunter as a character? Because I think for me, I'd probably just have to say he's kind of the rock of the group. You
hmm
know, he's the voice of reason oftentimes. I think you've even seen growth in him as a character. I think early on it was like sort of just this state of confusion. You know, what is happening? It feels like you know, the Republic has betrayed us. All these clones were, you know, killing Jedi, and you kind of see the progression of Hunter as a father figure too.
Right.
Early on, he's like, "How do I just get Omega to a safe place?" And eventually, it's like, "How do we protect Omega at all costs?"
Right.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. For me,
yeah,
that's exactly the my favorite characteristic of him is understanding his role as kind of the dad of the crew, especially to Omega, and how he leads. Honestly, I mean, he kind of leads with a true heart. I don't know if that's like an actual thing, but it feels like it's with the best intentions at mind at all the times. Although he is a clone, and obviously with what has happened to all the clones with the inhibitor chips and all that. Um, and I forget, did they have to remove his as well?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
as part of the first season? Was
I
that what?
actually just watched that episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, through all of that, and I don't know, like, and that's what's so great about these clones is that they are very much different from all the other clones because of this. So, and he is the embodiment of what, because he's kind of the most, yeah, the leader. He's truly the leader of this crew, and is able to, and as wild as this crew is, I mean, if you look at them, they're all over the place. He reminds me of Phil Jackson. You remember how Phil Jackson had to have Pippin and Jordan, and then like Rodman. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
these great characters, Kobe and Shaq, and so you just have these big personalities. He's able to wrangle them in, and they listen to him. That's the thing; they listen to him, because they look to him for that leadership. So, I think that's probably my favorite characteristic of our boy Hunter.
And we should do a special, by the way, for all our other, you know, compadres who are also basketball and Star Wars fans as simultaneously as you and I are. I know that's probably like not a huge amount of people who listen to this podcast, but we need to do an episode where we're like, this Star Wars character would be this
Oh my
basketball
gosh, that would
player.
be so fun.
That would actually be really fun to do sometime.
Yeah.
but yeah, I think you said it all with Hunter. Um, I don't know if we said this or not, but we do have this like little kind of short blurb about each of the characters. Um, Hunter, the de facto leader of the group, his honed tracking skills and fierce combat make him a formidable force on the battlefield. And I think a lot of these, blurbs are kind of they're great to kind of get a brief insight into the character. But I think kind of watching the show gives you even more depth as to kind of how each of these characters grow. And I think I would probably say Hunter along with Omega, and I would even throw Crosshair in this group of characters are the ones that experience the most. I don't know if I'll call it growth because I don't know if in the case of Crosshair it's always positive,
Yeah.
but change that is
Change, yeah.
influential to how they operate as a
The
character.
delta is very wide with
Yeah,
Crosshair.
yeah. Sometimes it might be a negative delta. But yeah, did you have any other thoughts on Hunter before we move on to our boy Rika?
He looks like Rambo. I mean, that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, honestly, that's probably the character design for Hunter too. It's just good old Sylvester Stallone running through the jungles of I don't know. I've actually only seen the first Rambo. Have you ever seen
I've
any
definitely
of the
seen
other
all of
ones?
them. I've definitely seen all of them, but
Have you really?
I couldn't tell you. They're all exactly the same. I feel like lots of guns.
So somehow
Yeah,
Rambo has returned.
lots of guns, lots of biceps. I mean, that's pretty much
Yeah.
it.
What else do you need from a Rambo movie? But yeah, I guess something else we could touch on briefly with each character is kind of if we have any expectations for them
Mm,
in season 3. I and maybe this could be like the final closing point for each character that we make. Um Mainly, will they just be around at the end of
yeah,
season
yeah.
3
I was about to
as
say the
part
same
of
thing. Yep.
as part of kind of, what we expect for them in the season, and so I would expect Hunter to be here throughout the season, certainly, be the one that's leading the charge trying to get Omega back. I I personally see him alive at the end of the season, and
Hmm.
I know there's a lot of people that think none of the Bad Batch is gonna be
Right. Yeah.
alive at the end of this, so I really hope that's not the case personally. I'd like to see them in future stories, maybe post this timeline, but that remains to be seen. I think I want to have a meaningful moment of connection between him and Omega, where it
Hmm.
really feels like that reuniting of father and daughter. I think that's what I'm most looking forward to with him in season 3.
Yeah. Early poll results from Twitter. I already did put out a question
Oh,
if
nice.
people will
I'm voting on it right now.
if people think that they will be surviving. A whopping 70% think they won't be surviving out of season
Actually,
3.
I actually did see that we had posted this already, and I think I voted for it, yes. And then when I saw that the response was majority no, I was like, "What?
Yeah, that's
No."
wild. That's wild, Star Wars fans. So I mean, I'm with you. I hope that he makes it all the way through. If and this is kind of I'm going to spoil the entire thing for like all of them. I think it's him and Omega at the end, and
Just him and Omega?
just him and Omega at the end. So
Oh,
that's
man.
my thought of how it ends.
I mean, don't get me wrong, a tech death, which we've already experienced, was emotional. An Echo death and a Crosshair death would be emotional. I cannot imagine them getting rid of Wrecker. He
I
is
know.
such a lovable character.
I know.
I don't
But
know.
he would be like the one that like saved her at the end. Like that's how I would see that. Like it was
Yeah.
up to him. It was either her or him, and he sacrificed one last time for her.
Yeah. I guess speaking of Wrecker, should we just kind of transition into talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
him?
yeah.
Um, Rika, as
Rekka,
Omega
Rekka.
calls him, an incredibly strong and true warrior, but also possesses an incredible amount of heart and care for his family and friends. I do think this is probably and I love Wrecker too. I think this is probably the most likable character of the group. Um,
I kind of look like
most
him. Look at
I saw you squinting. I was like,
that.
I was like, what are you doing? trying
I'm
to
trying to look like him right there.
look like Wrecker a little bit. Yeah, I would say he's definitely the most lovable character of the group, and I think he has that uh, that prototype of being like a teddy bear who is like a teddy bear on the inside but rough and rugged on the outside, sort of thing. I think he's incredibly lovable, a softy on the inside who, while he is a physical powerhouse, it's the moments where like, some of my favorite Wrecker moments are when he and Omega start the tradition after the missions. They go and eat that, like, I don't
Oh
remember
yeah.
what they call it, like the kettle corn stuff or something
Hmm.
like that, that
That's
they
right.
end up charging to Sid's tab and, get one after every mission or something like that. It's the fun bonding moments that really create like, Hunter is to Omega as father is to daughter, but Wrecker is to Omega as big brother is to little
Absolutely.
sister. And
Absolutely.
and it's such a playful, fun relationship that these 2, um, like, while you need the relationship of Hunter and Omega, the amusement and the fun that comes from the Wrecker Omega relationship is really, I think, pleasing to see as part of this show, and especially because in the moments like we were talking about the episode where they get their inhibitor chips taken out. Like, there's a moment where she's, like, looking at him as he's being controlled by this thing, saying like, "Rika, I'm
Yeah.
your friend,"
Oh my gosh, my
and
heart.
yeah, it's honestly, each of the bad members of the Bad Batch, you kind of look at them after the first 4 or 5 episodes of this show through the lens of their relationship with Omega.
Mhm.
Um, which, when I first met Omega in this show, I was like, "I don't know how I feel about the character."
Mhm.
But she definitely grows on you as you watch it, and especially because you kind of see the other characters through the lens of their relationship with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
the where you saw the kind of growth you saw from Hunter and from Crosshair and Omega with Wrecker, he was pretty solid throughout. Where as far as there wasn't any truly growing moments. I mean, maybe into the role of the big brother, kind of as you mentioned. But other than that, he's the kind of guy that is solid for you. He's there for you, you know. And everyone's got that friend where you could just depend on. You can call up Wrecker and he'll be there, either with jumper cables or just a ride. This is Wrecker. This is who we're talking about. So, I so there's no real need to grow this character, too much. I mean, yeah, he's silly and he's fun and that type of thing, but even in the description, they talk about his heart. The heart that
Mm,
he has is one of his greatest assets, and there's no need to really change that because of it. When you've got somebody like Hunter, when he has to learn to lead in a certain way, or obviously with Crosshair through the conflicts and things that he has to go through. But with someone like Wrecker, again, he is solid for a reason because although all the people around him are changing, growing, or moving away, you got to have like a center. You have to have a center of where of the group, the glue, if you will. And I think
mm,
that's him. I think he's the glue that keeps them together because even when I could think of moments with like whether it was Tech or Echo or whoever, they know that they can depend on with on Wrecker. So I feel that's his role with the crew, and um, I hope I would love for him to make it out, but like I said, I there's and we'll talk about Tech in a little bit here, but the way that they set a precedence with Tech that
mm.
they may not make it, that is a possibility now. Once you open that door, all of a sudden it's a game changer for the rest of the crew.
I think as we transition into tech, I'm gonna take the super optimist point of view. I think they all make it to the
Okay.
end, and I think Tech is not dead.
Okay.
Is that a hot take?
I mean, that's definitely a hot take, but I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that we've seen. So I mean, even within this crew, Echo, we thought was dead. You know,
Right?
so I
Yep.
mean, this would not be the craziest thing, but
Right,
and I
right.
would not be mad about it. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, the same thing happens with Echo. I mean, for those that haven't seen the Clone Wars, there's an explosion, and it's heavily implied that Echo was killed in the explosion, and you later learn that he was captured and being tortured that whole time, and then you see him in Bad Batch. He comes back, so anything can happen. And we talked a little bit when it came to Wrecker about the
Mhm.
lovability of the character. If Wrecker is the most lovable character, I would argue Tech is the second most lovable,
Yeah.
because he has this element of kind of social awkwardness. Like, he's so intelligent, he's so brilliant. He is the one who, navigates them through plans by, allowing them to understand what the steps of the operation are going to be, whether it's, hacking a computer or
Mhm.
like having them scientifically understand what they need to do. It's really the stuff that Tech doesn't say, or perhaps the way he says things that makes me endeared to the character, because it's just he's so blunt, but he's not saying it to be mean. It's just like that's kind of who he is, and I
Right.
I find humor in that personally. I think there is a sort of a sweetness to that he's lacks social awareness, but he kind of has the ability to be um, this loving figure in a way that is not overtly loving.
Right.
He's just a member of the crew who does what he needs to do. He's socially unaware, and that's why I like him so much. And he kind of has that weird arc in season 2 where he and Fee are kind of like a thing, but not a thing. You're not
Right.
really sure.
Right.
She calls him no, Sid calls him Goggles. What does she
Brown
call
eyes?
him?
Didn't you just call him brown eyes?
Brown
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where was that
So
trivia question? God.
I wouldn't have got it. My trivia knowledge, as we all know, is in the toilet at this point. But yeah, Tech, a very important asset for the Republic due to his increased mental aptitude, and he plans out incredible strategies for the team as an expert in military tactics. My guy Tech. I think he's alive. Comment down below if you're watching the video version of the podcast if you think Tech is alive or not. But I think they're gonna bring him back. I don't think he's gone for good yet. I know, Joey, do you have the feeling that he is
I'm
not
I'm
go that he is gone for good?
no, I'm going to be I am here. Okay, here's my two routes here, right?
Uh-huh.
I will be cautiously optimistic that he comes back, but obviously if they bring him back, he's not dying again. You know what I mean? So
Mhm,
they wouldn't do that. So I think I would love to see him come back. Well, one of my favorite things about this character in Tech is that he is like he feels like very different from even this crew, because of his the way he talks, the way he is able to communicate, very analytical, very C3PO. This reminds me,
yeah.
I mean, you even look at like just him, there's a photo of him here on the podcast. Just kind of has that like robotic type of look, where it's supposed to
Mhm,
be, very much more like a protocol droid than an actual person. So I think um I think it's cool that they include him in such a different way.
mhm,
And he is presented in such a different way from everyone else, because that's how like people are, how. So there's some people, some fans who truly really identify with this character, because maybe because of the social awkwardness, maybe because of maybe they understand things in the and how they their brain works, but they're unable to say it exactly like how everyone else says it.
mhm,
And but so I think that's what's the coolest thing about this character is that it brings in such a realistic view on like people. Although these are all like different clone, they're all clones, and by definition, clones are kind of like all the same, right? I think he kind of stands above the most, stands away from the other ones the most
mhm.
because of the way he communicates and stuff like that. So, um, one of my favorite characters for sure was very, very sad. If you go watch back the episode, the reaction of when he did not make it from out of the episode, we were both pretty visibly shook that that even happened. So, um, and again, that just as I said when I was talking about Wrecker, again opens the door to the possibility that all the characters don't make it out of the season. So does that mean everybody doesn't make it? I don't know. Apparently, 70% of the people on Twitter think they don't, but I think the the possibility is there now. But as a character, Tech definitely one of my favorites. Um, I don't necessarily see myself in Tech. I like to think I'm analytical, but the way that, I mean, this is definitely someone's Star Wars right here. This character right here,
Mm.
they see themselves in, and I love that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that is the cool part about just the Bad Batch. They're all so different that I think no matter who you are watching, it's easy to find yourself in elements of at least one of them. And I would say I definitely see a little bit of myself in Tech. Um, I don't know what it means that I see probably most of myself in Crosshair,
Right.
but but he'll be one we talk about here in a second. So um, I guess next up we had Echo. And Echo is a character who is interesting because he's the only non-mutant member of the Bad Batch, and that he is not technically an altered clone. He is originally a member of the 501st, which I actually did not know until recent. I mean, I had known at some point in the past, and then you and I watched something together before today's pod to refresh our memory, and I was like, oh yeah, he was a member of the 501st. Thought to be dead in an explosion, but ended up being taken and was tortured by the Techno Union, and is now, as a result of sort of that time, he is half machine, half man. He's got this sort of arm thing that allows him to kind of, how R2 does in the original
Mm-hmm.
trilogy, where he uses it for some of the Death Star stuff. Tech can do that, or excuse me, Echo can do that with his arm of sorts now. Echo is equipped with technological advancements. This former clone commander is now able to plug into any network or communication outpost, providing incredible intelligence for his new team. I will say Tech, or I keep saying Tech instead of Echo. Echo is one of the characters that I think probably has received the least attention of the Bad Batch
Mm-hmm.
crew. I feel like that would at least be fair to say. And maybe it's not because he doesn't have as much of a role in the show, just as it is his story has somewhat been told in previous shows.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He's definitely a member of the crew, and you get the sense that he is. But a lot of the times, it doesn't feel like he has the same meaningful connection to the story that a lot of the other characters do,
Right.
especially when it comes to Omega. Like, there's this father daughter dynamic with Hunter, there's this brother sister dynamic with Wrecker. Even towards the last few episodes, before Tech's death, or if he is actually dead, you did see this kind of bond being explored between Tech and Omega that was kind of hinting at maybe something is going to
Right.
happen to Tech, or to Tech. So anyways, I would say Echo is a character who we probably have explored the least of the members of the Bad Batch, but I would love to see more from, and I love the way he interacts with Rex as well in this show. That's kind of a fun reunion we got to see at this
Mm-hmm.
point, or I think it was back in season 1 of Bad Batch. But
Right.
what are your thoughts on Echo as a character?
Yeah, I think with the amount of exposure we've gotten to this character in Echo before the Bad Batch, I think although I feel he belongs to this crew because I'd have to remember how they kind of took him into the crew, but it was like he chose the crew to go to, if I'm not mistaken, at some point because they were trying to I forgot the story, but either way, I think he's a good fit for the crew. But just like you said, there wasn't a ton of storylines I don't remember that really focus around him. And not to say that we wouldn't want more, but he is, just like whenever we do our drafts, right?
Hmm.
Or our favorite picks or whatever. There's always going to be one that kind of keeps falling down the ladder, and I feel like Echo is the one in this crew, just because we didn't know anything about the rest of the crew. Especially when you've got someone like Omega, where there's a completely new character and we know nothing about her, and she's a child, and it's going to be the main focus. But eventually, there's going to be somebody who's going to unfortunately fall down the ladder a little bit, one by one. And I think Echo is that character. Now, what he brings to the crew is very valuable. I mean, he's a droid without being a droid, um,
Hmm.
is able to fight and all this all these great skill sets, but at the same time, when you look at a crew and there's a droid on the crew, the droid is kind of like secondary. He's like a utility to the crew. And maybe that's kind of what we're seeing in Echo here as well.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I would say, and I also think it's. I would say that Echo makes it out of season 3 and the finale. I think after everything he's been through, like kind of the
True.
same rationale with Tech that you were talking about earlier, like bringing someone back from the dead, quote unquote, only to have them not make it in the end again, doesn't feel very Bad Batch like, or
Hmm.
just like Star Wars animation, I guess. Not that they couldn't do it, but I definitely see Echo making it out of the show. Um, Having said that, I think the candidate for probably most likely to not make it out of the show, I would argue, is Crosshair. Which
Yeah.
saddens me because
Yeah.
he's my favorite member of the Bad Batch. I think a lot of people probably think about that or hear that and they're like, "What? He literally betrays them, he tries to kill them. Like, how can you possibly like him the most?" It's not obviously that I like those actions he's doing. But I think anytime you talk about movies or TV, if there is a character that undergoes a hardship, whether he's in control of that or not is not necessarily essential to the point it's trying to make. It's
Hmm.
that he eventually is going to have to overcome that. And
Right.
so I love characters that, you know, maybe like toe the line between good and evil and eventually triumph over something that was impeding their way to do the right thing in the end. Like that for me is a really fun character and a really great story to hear and listen to. Which, is always why I like the characters like that in Star Wars. The ones that are like, am I good? Am I bad? I'm gonna sort of toe the line. And I think Crosshair is one of the best examples we've had of that in Star Wars. I mean,
Hmm.
he's a skilled sharpshooter, a great marksman, rarely misses his target. Um, and he's excuse me, he's the only member of the Bad Batch who's overcome by Order 66. But again, he's a great character, and that's why I love him. I think my favorite Bad Batch episode. I There was a few episodes where Crosshair wasn't even in the show,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Dang, I really want to hear from Crosshair again. I don't know where he is." And then there's this episode where, in the 3-minute synopsis I gave, I talked about it very briefly earlier, where it's him and Mayday, this other guy. They've been tasked with retrieving cargo, and during this task, they're in this blizzard, and Mayday is injured, and Crosshair is like carrying him back to base. And there's this really just bratty Lieutenant Nolan who is like, "Leave him, just let him die. It's not worth it." And in that moment, Crosshair almost breaks a little bit back towards where he initially was with the Bad Batch. And he's like, No, this clone's life does have meaning."
Hmm.
And literally just decides to, shoot this annoying
Right.
Lieutenant Nolan, who is probably the most I don't know about the most villainous, but the character who I found to be the most annoying in the
Yeah.
show. I was
Always
like,
one.
"All right, good riddance, Lieutenant Nolan." So that was my favorite episode of Bad Batch so far, and I think not only because it involved my favorite character, but because it was the culmination of everything you've been seeing with Crosshairs, wrestling with this stuff inside of himself for the past like season and a half at that point. So I love me some Crosshair.
That you do. And to your point earlier, he's going to be like, what is is it a sine wave?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
goes up and down over the axis there. That's going to be that's Crosshair.
Hmm.
And you mentioned it time and time again. Those types of characters are always going to be the most interesting because and kind of drive the story in a certain, in a way. Because if it was just the Bad Batch doing missions and things like that, okay, that's a storyline. But you have this whole other side with Crosshair's story and what is going to happen with him Is he going to rejoin the Bad Batch? Is he going to side with the Empire? What's going to be the end goal? Of course, you would like to see him, of course, be back with the Bad Batch with Omega and everybody. But up until this point, we'll find out. So, and I think that we'll talk a little bit more about the episodes and what we're kind of expecting from everything. But at some point, they all will be back together. You would assume.
Mm.
And to your point earlier, does he make it out of this one? Probably the candidate that the most elected, votes for to get offed by the end of the season, unfortunately. But just because of all the things that he's done, and I was actually watching the first episode of season one where he was trying to go after Kanan or Caleb Doom, and I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this dude is just out of control. Of course, knowing later that what had happened with Order 66. But either way, I think Crosshair definitely brings a lot of interest into the show itself. And even when
Mm.
they were separated, when they would be a couple episodes of the Bad Batch and then one episode of him, and those he's able to carry those episodes. So that's why the character is so important, or that shows that the character is so important because he's able to have his own completely own episode on his own, and have it be really interesting and, like you said, be your favorite episode of Bad Batch. So it's definitely he's definitely worth a ton to this crew, and I can't wait to see how they kind of reconcile everything together.
Yeah, me too. And I think honestly, at this point, it's worth noting in season 3, I mean, he's captured. He's like kind of with them now,
Yeah.
even though he's not physically with them. Like as soon as they are to rescue him, it's kind of just assumed that he's going to be integrated back into the squad,
Mm-hmm.
especially considering he warned them about the Empire coming
Right.
after Omega. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing more Crosshair. I hope this guy makes it to the end of season
Yeah.
3, although like you said, probably the most likely candidate to make a sacrifice of himself at some point in the season 3 finale perhaps. So, we will anxiously await that in season 3. And then of course, who could forget Omega,
Omega.
the young female clone who proves to be the heart of the squad. She is the first female clone of Jango Fett, as best as I understand it. She is also an unaltered clone, so she does not age fast like the other clones do. She is both insightful and compassionate. She's really the moral voice of reason, oftentimes in these early missions. The Bad Batch goes on together, and as well as some of the missions in season 2. I would add. The major thing I wanted to bring up with Omega, and maybe this is a whole nother area of conversation, but she's obviously a very desirable target for the Empire, especially at the end of season 2. Um, is Omega I think this may have been a discussion around the time the show, season 2 came out. Is Omega Force sensitive?
Mm.
Because, there's lots of theories out there that are speculating part of the reason why she's so important is because there may be a force sensitivity component where she would be the first clone to ever be force sensitive. And that, if you're talking like expanded universe stuff, that has all kinds of implications for like Palpatine cloning himself and stuff like that. So, as a character, Omega is obviously vital to this show. She's the one that makes the show go. She really transforms the other characters as a result of who she is as a character. And so, having said all of that and leaving that question on the table of kind of what if she is force sensitive, first of all, is she? And if she is, what does that mean for the show? What are your thoughts on Omega heading into the last season of The Bad Batch?
So you blew my mind with the force sensitivity a bit. Beat. I sound like her now. I that would be something else, especially because we've seen in the recent past with Sabine, kind of showing her force sensitive, being how showing her how she's force sensitive, and I would be interested in seeing if they would bring that in right now, and if that was something that we saw early on, and I don't remember if we've seen any types of clues or any hints that to that be the case where she is force sensitive. But no, that would be very cool if that was a possibility. But the character of Omega definitely a favorite. I was kind of in the same boat as you. As I'm like, I'm not sure exactly how this is all going to work. You know, you've got the clones, you've got the kid. How are we going to be able to get through all of this? And but they did such a good job at showing how they become a family. It reminds
Mhm.
me a lot of like Rebels. Remember when
Yeah.
Rebels? That was like, I mean, they came out of the gate with that one, where they were kind of already a family. Then Ezra came in and kind of whatever. But with the Bad Batch, I think Omega made this family. You know, it was it was Clone Force 99, a bunch of clones just being clones in the clone kind of way. Even in that first episode, they were like, um, the very first episode of the series. I forget. Oh, it was Kanan that went to go get him originally, and and whoever the commanding officer of the clones were was talking with Deepa Balaba, like, oh, how many did you bring? And he said only 5, and then so then they come in and they just kind of wipe out all the clankers, and that was just their role. That's just what they did. They were the cleanup crew. That's what they did. You bring Omega into it, and all of a sudden it's a family. Not all of a sudden, but over time, they become this family, and that's the overall overarching like theme of the show is this family that's built through the Bad Batch. So, and it takes a very specific, very special kind of character to do that, and that character is Omega. So that's why she's so important to not only the Bad Batch, but to kind of like Star Wars,
Yeah.
because that's always kind of been the theme. I mean, the Skywalker family. Now you've got the Bad Batch, the Rebels. So I think that you're when you're able to bring that sense of family because of a specific character, that character is going to be special. So, um, as much as I wasn't sure where we were going when we first started watching Bad Batch, now that we're at the end of it, I'm so happy we went along for the ride.
Yeah, me too. I think a lot of people, including myself, were in that same boat of like, the first episode or two with Omega, you're like, I'm not really sure about this,
Right.
and now we get to where we are now, and you really see like the implications of her role in the show, like her being an unaltered clone, potentially force sensitive, and even if she's not, she clearly carries some vital information for the Empire. So she's obviously important to the scope of the show, but then even probably more so importantly, like you said, it's really about Omega being the nucleus, if you will, of this family of the Bad Batch members, and that she's really been able to create and further that group as a family. So it doesn't happen without Omega in this show, I would argue. But he's a great character. I'm sure there's tons of implications for kind of everything that's gonna potentially happen to Omega in season 3, but leave your thoughts as well on that for what you think may be in store for Omega as we venture into the final season of this show. And speaking of the final season of this show, we wanted to just very briefly list off all of the episode names that are coming out within the next 3 months. As we approach the 1 hour mark of this week's episode, just real briefly, the episode names are starting with episode 1, Confined, and then Paths Unknown for 2. 3 is Shadows of Tantus. Those 3 will all be in the premiere next week. 4 is A Different Approach. 5, The Return. 6, Infiltration. 7, Extraction. 6 and 7 will be shown together in the same week. 8 is Bad Territory. 9, The Harbinger. 10, Identity Crisis. 11, Point of No Return. 12 is Juggernaut. 13, Into the Breach. 14, Flash Strike. And episode 15, the finale, is titled The Cavalry Has Arrived. Joey, is there any of those that stands out to you as significant or potentially impactful episodes just based on the title alone?
Well, we know Ventress is returning.
Mhm.
So with the episode on March 6th of episode 5 called The Return, I would hope that would mean her return into the Star Wars universe. So that would be my and I would love it to have an early um episode of Asajj, because in all honesty, as much as I would love to, I can't wait to see Ventress back in animated form. I don't know what it will do for the storyline here. I
Right.
don't know what that provides. So I don't envision her being in the last half of the episodes. Where if it is truly episode 5, the return, kind of a perfect spot, because it's before the 2 episode week with episode 6 and 7. But so I feel like that episode might be just kind of like for the fans. Like
Yeah.
this one's for you guys. We know how much you loved Ventress, and by the way, New Tales of the Jedi will have Asajj Ventress. Like I feel
Oh,
like that
if
that would be kind of great. So for me, as much as we love Asajj, as we've talked about her like week after week, I think that would be a good spot for her.
I think it's also realistic to, if she returns in episode 5, to expect her to maybe help infiltrate and extract Crosshair and Omega in episodes 6 and
Yeah,
7.
yeah,
I don't think that's out of the realm of
yeah.
possibility. Maybe even somewhat likely. But I definitely agree with you in that I'd be surprised if we see her continually throughout episodes 8, 9, 10, and on.
Right,
Maybe she's in 5, 6, and 7, and then she comes back to help at the end for 14 or 15. But I don't see how Asajj can fit into this last season as a main plot point.
right.
Are they bringing her in to kind of just excite fans for in another aspect? Sure. Yeah, I feel like that's fair to say. Are we, mad about it? No.
No,
Like, bring us more Asajj. Like, I would love to have Asajj in every episode of this show for the sake of seeing Asajj. But I think for the sake of the show, it probably would be better if she's not in every
right,
episode. And I think it's pretty safe to say she's not going to be in every episode. So, um, yeah, maybe like episode 5, we get to see her for the first time. Maybe even 6 and 7, she helps break out Crosshair and
hmm
Omega, and then perhaps at the end of the show as well. So that remains to be seen. But those are definitely the ones that stood out to me as well. I'm excited. First of all, that we get to watch 3 episodes next week together, and then second of all, that we get to see 6 and 7 together on March 13th, which is going to be pretty impactful because that's probably when we see the reunification
hmm
of the remaining members of the Bad Batch, and maybe even Tech if he's alive.
Come on,
Who knows?
we got this tech.
That's wait. What if that's what the return is? What if
Oh, that's a
it's
good
Tech's
point.
return?
That's a good point.
We'll find out in about a month's time. Looking forward to watching all of those with you here on the Hoth Hangout channel. And we should also mention we briefly previewed it at the beginning of today's episode, but the viewer question for this week is: will Clone Force 99 survive until the end or past the end of season 3 of the Bad Batch? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments of the video version of the podcast, or over on any of the socials, or via email, hothangout@gmail.com. Your response to if you think the Bad Batch will survive the end of the season. Let us know. Which brings us to next week's episode. We are covering the premiere of The Bad Batch. We're going to be talking episode 1, episode 2, and episode 3. It's going to be a lot to break down and discuss. It might be, I imagine, at least a 70-minute episode next week, potentially, if we're lucky. Joey and I used to do like
Oh my gosh.
90-minute episodes on one episode of Andor. So we'll try to condense 3 episodes of
We're
The Bad
getting better,
Batch.
I promise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, it'll probably be like at least a 60, probably 70-minute episode next week. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to be covering all things Bad Batch premiere. And I mentioned at the top of the podcast that the podcast, at least for next week and probably for the next 12 weeks or so while this show is running, will be coming out on Friday rather than Thursday. If that changes, we'll let you know in next week's podcast, but definitely for next week, the podcast will be available at 11 a.m. Eastern on Friday rather than 11 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. And our reaction to the premiere will be available on the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel um, as late as Thursday morning, but as early as late Wednesday night. So, 2 videos coming next week, 1 podcast coming next week. as usual. Be on the lookout for both of those. We're excited to be covering it all. It's officially less than a week away. Joey, you got any final thoughts on Bad Batch
Oh my
stuff before we
gosh.
sign off?
I forgot. I mean, we've gone through a lot of Star Wars together, Ben. And
Hmm.
in the I guess we're coming up on a couple years now, right?
Yeah,
Toward
yeah.
yeah, we're we're into our second year here, so lots of Star Wars to have discussed to watch together. Bad Batch for me has been probably one of the more surprising ones to be as enjoyable as it's been, and to I mean we're gonna close this one out together too. So this is gonna be I think one of our first closeout ones as far as the series is concerned.
Yeah, true.
Um, so yeah, it's we're excited. I don't know what to expect out of the season. We watched the trailer together, just before the recording today. So it was definitely there's a lot of excitement coming around, and I'm still kind of shocked that it's happening so soon because they really dropped it on like that, and then like just a month or so later, we're gonna get the episode. So we're gonna have some fun, and can't wait for the next 3 months of Star Wars.
Me too. Well, we'll be here in less than 7 days to cover it all. As a final brief reminder, if you are not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout podcast, you can check us out for the video version of the podcast over on YouTube, as well as all of our weekly reactions to Bad Batch episodes and other Star Wars shows as they come out over on in video format on the YouTube channel as well. Additionally, you can contact us via Hoth Hangout or via email at hothhangout@gmail.com with your Star Wars related questions, thoughts, or comments, or otherwise, we'd love to showcase them here on the podcast and cover them as well. You can find the Hoth Hangout podcast anywhere you get your pods, including Spotify and Apple. And if you're listening on any platform that allows you to leave a 5-star review, leave a 5-star review. We would appreciate it very much, and it allows the podcast to be more easily discovered by other people as well. The Hoth Hangout podcast is the Hoth Hangout socials channels are findable on Instagram, TikTok, and X. Again, that's at Hoth Hangout for each of those. Man, Joey, I am super excited to watch this with you next week. We're officially less than a week away, and
Yes.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yep, it's gonna be like I said. I hope it's not going to be heartbreaking at the end of the series, but 70% of the people think that it's going to be. So we'll see if they're right.
Ugh, man, I don't know. I don't know. I'm excited though. Shout out to George Lucas. Shout out to Dave Filoni. Shout out to my boy Crosshair too, by the way. Yeah. Thank you to Gibbo for producing the Hot Hangout podcast, the videos, the assets, and for being the wrecker of our crew. And shout out to Joey for producing today's episode of the Hot Hangout podcast. Dude, this was like super seamless. I was I was like, man, killing it on the
I'm getting a little
producing end of
better.
things.
I've been watching Gibbo. I'm getting a little better.
There you go. There you go. Well, we appreciate y'all for listening to episode 69 of the podcast. Tune in next week for episode 70, as well as our reaction to the premiere of The Bad Batch. And until then, thank you for listening to this one. We appreciate each and every single one of you so very much. And we'll catch you next week for the premiere of season 3 of The Bad Batch. And until then, thanks again for listening, and may the Force be with you.